So long story short, we really don't want to mess with any of this. I mean, like I said, potentially you could change this last line if you wanted to, you know, and maybe you do, but you could do that down the road and experiment with which one of these particular values is going to do it. Now, if we start going down the line over here, we start seeing some more familiar tags. I mean, there's the table tag, because this layout is table based, and again, we're going to change that. But once we see that this table, we have the table tag and the table row and table data, all this stuff we can actually edit. We could completely take out even. I mean, we have, it's using strong, you know, like the bold character over here to put emphasis on this line that's required. That's not really best practice. What we'd want to change that is turn that into a label as opposed to a strong. We'll get to that, but so far everything we see here from table, tr, and all this can be edited. Now we're going to get to another important line, and if you're using Dreamweaver, you see that some of this stuff is color coded. If you haven't changed the defaults, it's color coded in yellow. Again, this yellow value over here is going to tell us some important stuff. It says, here we have input. Now this is creating this first field right over here in name, this input box right here. And this code is saying input type equals text, because it's waiting for text, and the name and ID is name. I'm sorry, the name equals name and ID equals name. We don't want to change this field, because obviously if we go back to those required values over here, you see how name, ID correlate to these value names over here. So this is how it knows that this particular field is required, because the IDs link up. The one thing we can change in here is size and value. Now, size refers to the length of this thing, and it says 40, so the default length of this thing is 40 characters, so we could change that if we wanted to. And value would be if by default we wanted to have a value in here. So now with these things set to 40 and a blank value, the form looks like so. This is the name, and then here's the input field that we're talking about. Now what I'm going to do is change the size value to 80 and the default value to Drago. So once I save that, let's see what happens. I'm going to refresh the screen. Okay, you see what I did here is extend this to 80 characters, and by default it put my name in here. So that's what that value does. For that, I'm going to leave it blank, and size I'll leave to 40. Now the next line is exactly the same as the first. The email address is exactly the same as the first, so the code is not that different. Again, name and ID equals email, and we see above over here that it correlates with the required variables over it. It says in that line required variables, and email is one of them, and that's how it knows that that field needs to be filled out. A little bit different is going to be our drop-down menu over here, and if we look at the next piece of yellow code, we see the select icon, because it's a select value. So select, and then the name equals field dash one blah 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 whatever. Again, just trying to emphasize the point, the name and IDs cannot be altered, because that corresponds to something specific to Response-O-Matic. And the same thing over here when we have the required value. This name over here is exactly this name over here. That's how it knows it's required. And if you look underneath, the very first option value is what it's going to default to. And when we look at our form, that's what it says. If we look here, all the values in our drop-down menu, it says the first one, prefer not to say, value equals prefer not to say, and then after that it actually writes it over, you see. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different values, and we have 5 different values over here. If you wanted to add another value to here, obviously it's just pretty simple. You just take that code, you copy and paste a new value, and you want to make sure you change both the value, what the value is equal to, like value equals and the actual name. Because if I were to just change, so let me just take a look at with this one line. If I were to just change the value equals inside of that to, let's say, surfer, what's going to happen is when I refresh this in the browser, I'm going to have unemployed and unemployed twice. But if someone were to send out this form, it's actually going to send it out as surfer. So just so you understand how this is happening, the part that's nested within the value tags is what the user is going to see, but the part that you set value equals is what's actually going to be sent to the server. So be attentive and make sure that if you change the value, you also, if you change, how can I explain this? You want to make sure you change the value and what the user sees. Otherwise, things will get a little screwy. So what I'm going to do is just put this over here. So I put surfer, and I'll put another profession. Why don't I put teacher? And then when I refresh this, I have a couple more values in my drop-down menu. Pretty easy. And the last thing is the other field, the text type in field, which I'm sorry, the comments field. My apologies. We have the B name, which is again the same as name and email, so there's nothing new there. And then the last thing we have is the text area, which is down here, which is a bit different than just input with the input value. The text area is going to give us this big box over here. And again, it says name and ID. We know that it's referring to that internal server stuff, so we don't want to edit that. But what we can edit is the row height and the column. So obviously this means 6 character rows by 40 character width. So if we change the row value to 9 and the columns to 80, oops. Once we save that, it's going to get significantly bigger. And you notice how it doesn't care. We set a fixed width and height for our form, which makes making a background and stuff easier to play with, but it also makes stuff like this a little more dangerous, because we could just pop out of our value, pop out of our actual div. And the other thing that some people may find annoying is this is what it looks like in Firefox, and it's also going to be a fixed width in Internet Explorer. But if we were to preview this page in Safari has this thing that, as of yet, I don't know how to turn off if even possible, but a lot of people seem to like it, and that's this ability to expand it to however the user wants. So, keep that in mind when you're making these values. I mean, people are going to be able to edit this to what they think is best for them, which may not be exactly what may be best for your layout, but what are you going to do? And the last value we have over here is our submit button, which I changed to send it over, and it was just submit before. Now, that's the very last line of code. It says input type equals submit, and the value is what's going to be in the written inside the button. You could change. You can't change the type to submit, but you could change the value of submit to whatever you want. I mean, you could change this to submit, and then it'll, when you look at it, oops, let's see, we'll do submit. So now let's preview this thing. So I changed this. Oh, sorry. Let me actually fix this top portion over here and get this to something a little more reasonable, so it doesn't kill our layout. Now let's look at this again. So you see, I changed that to some bit instead of submit. But you see what I'm saying is that you could actually change the value of this to whatever you like. The value, not the type, because the type actually defines that this thing is going to be a submit button for the entire form.